Okay, I'll go ahead and call this joint city council and planning commission meeting to order. It is Wednesday, December 13th. The time is 4 p.m. Our first item is a discussion of psilocybin prohibition, and I'm gonna turn it over to our city planner, Jacob Greichen, to give us a review of how we basically put a 2-year stop on that. And now here we are again, right?
Yeah, while they're getting the presentation set up, I'll just prime it. So we have a moratorium. It was a 2-year moratorium that ends at the end of next year. And so, you know, the winter is a time where we like to do code amendment type work. And so winter's right around the corner, and we thought this was a good opportunity to kind of do a little bit of research to see what's happening in other cities and to gauge the level of concern from these two bodies to see if we want to do anything and if we need to prioritize and stuff like that. So Jenny's put together this presentation to help remind and educate of where we're at for the purposes of that discussion.
Yeah, don't worry, it's not too long. This will probably take, I don't know, 10-15 minutes, and then we'll just open it up for discussion.
This is not a public hearing.
Yeah, so if you don't mind going to the next slide. So just a little background. In November 2020, ballot measure 109, as codified ORS 475A, directed the Oregon Health Authority to license and regulate the manufacturing, transportation, delivery, sale, and purchase of psilocybin products, and the provision of psilocybin services. So that happened in 2020. And then in our general election in St. Helens, November 2020, we passed ballot measure 5288, which prohibited psilocybin for 2 years. We had a 54% yes to prohibition and a 46% no to prohibition when that was passed. And then in January 2023, the OHA, after their series of rulemaking, began accepting applications for licenses. And then in summer of 2023, psilocybin service centers began opening their doors to clients. And so the rest of this presentation is what the heck is a psilocybin service center, and what do they look like? And you know, we have these in Oregon now. So what do they look like? So the OHA has a list of all of the licenses they've issued since December 2023. So the breakdown of licenses, there are 17 service centers which are licensed. That doesn't mean there are 17 open. That just means there are 17 that have been issued licenses. There's 166, I think that says, facilitators. So those are the individuals which are licensed to provide these services. And then there are 7 manufacturers and 7 laboratories that the OHA has permitted.
And the moratorium was for the manufacturers and the service centers.
And locally, yeah.
Quick question, are we talking, is this more medicinal or is this recreational?
This is purely medicinal. Yeah. These are, yeah.
There's a big difference, right?
So what are these licenses? So first, the manufacturers. So when they issue a license for a manufacturer, what is that? So manufacturers cultivate or produce or process psilocybin products. The cultivation of psilocybin products can only occur indoors. Manufacturers are required to hold at least one endorsement. So an endorsement is one of those 3 items there. So there's the cultivation endorsement, which is basically just growing it. There's the extraction endorsement, which is processing and extracting psilocybin extracts. And then there's the edible endorsement, which allows for production of food products that contain psilocybin. So you can have one of these, or you can have all 3 of these if you're a manufacturer. So this is kind of what the rest of the presentation is going to focus on, which is where you actually get the service. So service centers and facilitators. So the OHA defines service centers as locations where clients consume psilocybin during administration sessions. An administration session supervised by a licensed facilitator and must occur at a licensed service center. So facilitators have to complete a training by OHA, so it's curriculum developed by OHA, and then they also have to pass a test that's administered by OHA in order to be a licensed facilitator. And there's other licensing requirements like a criminal background check, and other, requirements for those facilitators. An administration session is the only time that a client can purchase, psilocybin products. And clients are required to remain at the service center for the site for a minimum duration of time until their administration session is complete. So they're not buying the product and consuming off-site, it's done all entirely within a service center with the facilitator present. And then during the duration of those session is based on the dose. And there's requirements around designated client administration areas and product storage areas. So how these service centers are set up is regulated by OHA.
Do you happen to know what kind of educational background is required for a facility?
I don't know the specifics other than there's a little bit more information in the next few slides, but I don't know if they are required to have a bachelor's or
No,
like that.
I think it's pretty minimal.
Yeah, 21 years of age, pass a background check,
You're taking.
take the training, yeah. Yeah. And then service centers can also contain other areas, so like lobbies, meeting rooms, and back offices. And then service centers could also have indoor and outdoor areas at their premise. Next slide. So this is a handout. I'm not expecting you to read this, but OHA does have a lot of information on their website just about the process. I just wanted to point out a couple things on this slide. OHA is saying that there's benefits to medical psilocybin, and they say that research suggests psilocybin may address depression, anxiety, trauma, and addiction. Studies have also found it can increase spiritual well-being. So this is, produced by the OHA. I'm not advocating for it, but this is what is on their website. And so I just thought it was important to point that out. And then up in the upper right-hand side, it talks about the process at these psilocybin centers. So first they meet with the licensed facilitator in a preparation session. So they don't actually consume it right away. There's a preparation session. They talk about what they're going to experience. And then they actually have a follow-up session where they administer and consume the product. And then they have what they're calling an integration session. So it's like a series of meetings where the facilitator is helping the client process what occurred during the session. They also offer peer support and other resources at that integration session. So next slide. So here's a little bit about the service center license requirements that the OHA requires. You have to be 21 years or older to apply. 50% of your ownership interest must be held by one or more individuals who have been residents of Oregon for 2 or more years. That does sunset in 2025. They require a LUX. So, Jacob and I process a land use compatibility statement for these centers. And on future slides, you'll see I contacted all of the cities that actually have these in their city to talk about how they fill that LUX out, just to get ideas. The service center for the OHA's requirement, it has to be at least 1,000 feet from any school. You have to pass a criminal background check, and the OHA does an inspection as part of their licensing process. And then in the left there, it wasn't listed, this is an OHA flyer, but the service centers also can't be located in areas that are zoned exclusively for residential. So these are intended to be in commercial areas.
I think the previous slides, said something about training. The administrator,
On the previous one, can you go back?
right side, far right, around there.
Oh, yeah, a training program with curriculum. Yeah, I kind of mentioned that. Thanks, Dan.
Also the other side.
So the top right talks about a curriculum.
So the Oregon Health Authority is relying on the local jurisdiction to confirm that it's not in a residential area and stuff like that, using that land use compatibility statement form.
Do they only inspect it during the initial process, or will there be like annual inspections, or?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Is the OLCC collecting the taxes on this or what? I mean,
I don't think it's taxed.
not taxing this at all.
Because it's not recreational.
I think I remember seeing rules about taxing in here too.
That's medical use only.
We'll be wondering, but we'll see what get their hands on that.
That's for just like.
Yeah.
That was matter.
Hands on their taxes. You know, interesting, well, we'll talk about it in a second, but you could scroll back down. So where are these at? So OHA publishes where they've licensed these centers. Some of the data you'll see is unknown, just because of how they're publicizing it. I had to go to each one's website to get the actual location, and some of them aren't open. But a majority of them are in Portland. So about 5 of these are open, as I can tell. So Portland, Albany, Eugene, Ashland, and Bend are the ones that have licenses.
And part of the moratorium was to kind of see how things picked up. Were there issues in other cities? I haven't seen any news reports of people freaking out.
So I read, and maybe you guys have seen this, there was an OPB article in November 29th, and it said that the first licensed center was Eugene, and it opened in June 2023. So that's the one here, Epic Healing Eugene. And the OPB article went on to say that 80 to 95% of the customers at these clinics thus far have been out of state customers, so people traveling from out of state to get services. The services cost between $1,000 and $3,000 just for one session. And so the OPB article talks about how this is mostly rich people who can afford to fly in to get these services and then afford the actual treatment, which isn't covered by your healthcare. And they also all reported wait lists that are indefinite. So it's really difficult to get in for these services right now because there's so few of them. Interestingly, the one in Albany, their website had a whole section on planning your stay and basically a tourism website promoting their services, saying, what do you do while you're on the wait list? Or what do you do when you fly in? Here are places to hike, to get massages, to go to theater, music venues, restaurants, hotels. I mean, they're basically promoting this as like medical tourism. So it's just interesting. You know, the city of Albany completely embraced this and thought that this is going to bring money to our community. Same with Ashland.
It's like a great black market opportunity. $1,000.
Well, I
3,000.
think that would work itself out eventually. It's like, how much did you pay for your first VCR? You know,
No, the people that are doing hot still, they've got their suppliers they've always had. Quality, they know what they're getting. They're not getting something that's just, yeah, so black market's there.
I think you have to zoom out just a little. So I called each one of the jurisdictions that has them open. So I was just curious what they're classifying them as. And my first step was to go, so I went to the city of Ashland's website, I'm looking at their municipal code and I'm searching for psilocybin to see if they have psilocybin service center listed as a use. They don't. So I called them, I said, what are you guys classifying this as on your your land use compatibility statement? And they said, we permit them as medical offices, which are allowed outright in most commercial zones. And they just require a site review for new construction, just like any other use. The same as City of Bend, they don't have a special use for psilocybin service centers. They just classify them as offices or clinics. And those are allowed in most zones with special exceptions. You'll see a theme here. City of Eugene permits them as clinics. And then before I submitted this, the city of Portland did get back to me in time. I did hear from them. They consider them either office or business services, or they also have a medical office classification that they can use. And the city of Albany calls them professional offices or office medical use as well. So there's a theme here where they don't have a special use category for psilocybin service centers, but the most similar use is one of a medical office. And so, yeah, go ahead.
And so really, you know, that's a key thing for us. You know, do we go by the similar use category? Or do we go to the extra step and create specific local rules pertaining to them? And that's why we'll want to bring it up now, just to see where everybody falls.
And just backing up, the expiration of our prohibition is in about a year. So we have time to think about this if we're concerned. And want to create special time, place and manner restrictions on where these can go. So that's why we're bringing it up.
So, but even if it's classified as a medical office or medical clinic, whatever application is, the other restrictions are still gonna be in there for these locations that don't apply necessarily to a regular medical office.
Right, you still have to get your license through OHA, which has its separate 1,000 feet from school. Not in primarily residential zone. Yeah, so the OHA requirements still apply,
And state statute, they're more restrictive than what we have
right?
on the books.
So I think there's one more slide. Oh, yeah, so what do these look like? So I went to Ashland. Took this photo or took a Google photo of what the inside and outside look like. You know, these just look like medical clinics. And this was part of a larger business complex, so they're actually sharing walls with other, you know, physical therapy or, you know, other medical offices. So, you know, in Ashland, it's no different. It's not like it's a sore thumb.
Is that the only picture you have? Cause I seen the one in the article.
Yeah, scroll down a little bit. There's
The one in
others.
Portland that they had on the news looked pretty fancy.
There's some like things hanging from the ceiling.
Oh, really? So this was one in Eugene, and actually Jacob took this photo when we were down there for a planning conference. He walked over to see, because he knew that it was the first one that had opened in the state. And the picture on the left is if you walk up to the building, there's a list of all the credentialed doctors that operate out of this office. So they're just amongst all the other doctors who already were here. And it makes sense that the first locations for these were not new construction, because the timeline was so fast. So they were just regular clinics that then started offering this new service under the use that had already been built. So
And I'm assuming this is a mixed use area. You have a lot of apartments. It feels very residential, but this is a fairly prominent street with some non-residential along it. So clearly not exclusively residential since it was allowed there.
and I think I have one more example in Portland. So this looked like it was a house that had been converted to a commercial use. And I saw an older photo that I think that it used to be a medical dispensary, and then when marijuana became legal, then it went to recreational medical, and now it's this new psilocybin service center. But you can see the ADA ramp leading up to it, and then what the inside looks like. Jacob was asking me if any of these had outdoor spaces, and as far as I can tell, they're limited and most of them are fenced. Just like this one had a backyard. Since OHA does allow them to have an outdoor component as part of their license, you know, that's something we should think about. If these things have outdoor areas.
And that's kind of the unknown, because the statute really doesn't provide any standards for if they're outdoor.
It doesn't have to be fenced in, 6 foot high fence or anything.
There's no stipulations on it.
Right.
So that's probably the one potential wild card.
That's something we could discuss, right?
Yeah, if that was enough of a concern to raise the bar to create local rules.
So this is the last slide. Just a reminder, the prohibition on psilocybin related businesses ends next year. So for the deadline, we kind of have two options. We can adopt specific rules related to psilocybin service centers in our development code that allows or restricts the time, place, and manner in which they can occur. Or we can do what other 5 communities have done, larger communities, and just utilize our existing rules. We looked at our code to say, well, if we're gonna utilize our existing rules, what would it be classified as? And we think the most similar uses, you know, using the methodology that other communities have used would be personal services or medical offices. And both of those uses are permitted in all of our commercial and mixed use zoning, including Holton and Riverfront District. So highway commercial, general commercial, Holton and Riverfront District would be kind of the main commercial zones.
And then manufacturing, which is supposed to be indoors, it's the statute's clear that that cannot be outdoors, would generally be in an industrial area. And so we actually made this assumption before contacting these other cities, and it just kind of confirmed, "Oh, okay, yeah, we're on the right track," which is, it's pretty intuitive. So our instinct is, well, doesn't seem like that big of a deal. You know, we're not that motivated to create the rules, but that's why we want to have this discussion to see where this goes and be like, no, okay, maybe we are motivated now.
I look at it as alternative medicine, so if this was to save one of my loved ones' life, they have PTSD or depression or something, and this was able to reprogram their brain, then I think it's a form of alternative medicine. My only concern in it is like when the pot shops came and a million of them opened up within each other. Can we limit the number of them, or?
Yeah, that's a good question and a good comparison. So for the pot shops, we were fortunate in that we established our policy before the green wave hit us. And one of the things we did was we created a 2000 separation rule between the establishments. And what that ended up doing is we had one in each commercial portion of town: highway, Holton, downtown. Interestingly, so the statute on these, it lets us impose time, place, and manner rules, but pertaining to that separation, we could not require more than 1,000-foot separation between the units. That's a maximum that we could do. So we couldn't do the 2,000, for example, for marijuana retailers.
So that's actually in the
The ORS.
ORS.
And I laugh because that's the method that cities use to restrict how many there were in their community. And so the state, they just said, well, no, you can't do that. They addressed it head on and said,
Imagine the pot shops open, you got to the county line and there was one every.
yeah, because they didn't adopt that rule. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember back, was it 2015? I mean, we were getting like 4 calls a week
Oh, yeah.
about what our rules are for marijuana. And I don't foresee this being the same level of interest.
I have a couple of concerns that I just want to bring up. One, I think that the reason why we put this out to the voters was because we didn't really know what to do. And as we remember, the voters shot it down. So that's my number one concern, is that we need to listen to the people of our community. And at the time, they're saying, no, I haven't heard a single phone call or a single person ask me about this until we talked about it today. So I feel like that's probably the same consensus right now. And if we want to, we can take it back out to the voters to see if anyone's minds have changed or if any of that has changed. But that's where my thought is on that. And then another thing is that the whole reason why we put it out to the voters instead of really, coming to a conclusion in the beginning was because it's brand new. Like there's so many variables, and even like the outdoor space. And I don't think we've quite had enough time to see how it's going to work out in those cities yet, to see maybe some of those problems that are going to occur, how we can, beat the curve if we do bring it to St. Helens. That's my 2 cents.
We can't restrict it
We
altogether.
can't prohibit
We
it.
can't prohibit it.
We can
Only
only,
the state said
yeah,
it was a vote to the state.
Yeah.
We can't say no.
we can't say, no, we don't want that here. We can only restrict time, place, and manner. So we can use zoning to limit how much.
The statute allowed that moratorium, but not an extension of it.
Okay.
It's not yes or
An
no.
extension of it. Okay. How was your thought too?
I don't think the public understood, like we didn't before this presentation, what it involves necessarily to see. Psilocybin drugs, kill it. But I think it sounds like something too expensive for the mean income of this town. I mean, why would they come here?
Well, they'll come here so they can bring people from out of town and make money.
Yeah.
So it's probably,
They're already doing it though. They're already.
well, I know, But, you know, our loved ones probably aren't gonna have the means to use that resource, unfortunately, so,
Don't you think the price is gonna come down as more things open up?
I do.
yeah. It's like marijuana, right?
The other, there's been promising research on low doses of it, and this is more of the guided vision type stuff, right? Where you're taking, like, you arrive at an amount to get to a certain level of euphoria, hallucination, right? And then the facilitator is the one that's helping you. That's why I was asking about the education background, because you're kind of, it's kind of a guided imagery thing, right? The low dose stuff is just more like the maintenance thing for like depression and stuff like that. So this is completely opposite of what I thought it was gonna be. I could be wrong about that, but that's my impression.
Yeah, there's no. Within the legislation today, there's no way you can take this home or like have a low dosage maintenance version of this. This is purely
It's coming, but
produced,
not there,
right? This is
yeah.
consumed on site with a facilitator.
Yeah.
That's all this allows.
I was adamant, like,
Prescription.
nobody know how, and my daughter kind of got in my face, like, this is changing the face of mental health medication. And it's like, you need to do more research before you assume no. She's very well read. She's like, this will help people that are beyond the reaches of current pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, that's what the OPB article talked about too. It was kind of interviewing people who went through service.
So it seems like a different approach than marijuana.
Yeah. A lot of the research too has been on like PTSD.
Depression is a big one. I
yeah.
have somebody that claims it saved his life because.
Who prescribes it, you know, a doctor, or is it a therapist, or
It's not a
Facilitation.
Yeah, there's.
somebody has to prescribe it, right, and say that they have them, wow.
If you have the money, you can go get on this wait list. There's no.
Wow.
Right? You have to be over
Right.
21.
See, that's different than marijuana too, because you had to go see a doctor to get a medical note saying you needed marijuana.
Yeah, but that was. That's true, but the doctors provided them
Probably gave it out. to
pretty,
anybody.
yeah.
That's true.
I think I read that. At the time, if you got a medical marijuana card, you couldn't get a concealed weapons permit.
Wow.
Prevent you from doing that. I don't know if it's true or still true, but. My other only concern is like with the marijuana industry is I don't like how intrusive. The smell is when you're passing their manufacturing or. Certain stores, it's just like. I lived somewhere and all of a sudden that was placed, luckily these have been commercial, but. I wouldn't want it to be intrusive of other people of the manufacturing or.
I definitely feel bad for the smell. If you've ever been in anybody that shares walls with. It's bad. It's bad and there's no getting rid of it.
I would have to move.
But I mean, imagine if that's your business,
Yeah, no,
you know, a dress shop,
Yeah.
you know. Like your whole office or something and your whole office reeks.
So as far as what a facilitator has to have, just reading this, must be 20 years of age or older. Must have been in the state for a bit. High school diploma or equivalent. And then, evidence of completion of education approved by the health authority, examination and other requirements of the authority. So the health authority has, you know, you have this kind of this minimal bar and then you pass all the health authority stuff.
Just would have expected more educational background for somebody that's working in this field.
Well, in my mental health background, what I think about is, you know, when someone goes through a treatment, usually there's somebody to process that with them, and it sounds like that's the person, but. You know, then they have to go back to their therapist in another state and talk to them about that experience. It just seems repetitive to me.
It does make sense.
Helpful to that person's overall treatment.
Well, and to that point, there is what they're calling an integration session. So it's optional though, that they can elect to go to a follow-up session where with a facilitator, the person who went through that treatment with them will help integrate what they've learned into their day-to-day life. That's what it's described as. Yeah.
I'm on the OHA email, so I get all these, the psilocybin stuff that's coming through like on a weekly basis on all these meeting. So they've been really looking into this. And that's why I'm kind of surprised that there's not some sort of like, A&D, maybe not an A&D counselor or a therapist, but somebody with some kind of background rather than high school education, legally employed to be able to work in the US,
Nurse
and a background
practitioner or
check,
something.
something like that. But so I'm kind of
Some
surprised.
prescriber.
I think with business liability, there'd be some level of that they're going to,
Yeah, I would think.
business owner would want to train the person.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's where it gets to is that there's a clinician that's running the business and training the person. I don't. So there are a lot of questions for you on this one, but it doesn't sound like we're gonna be able to stop anything from happening. Not that I'm advocating for that, but that's just gonna happen or like organically, right? But when I'm saying, oh, I'm to charge $1,500 a visit.
And, do we have a local layer of rules, like, for example,
Tax.
you make it a conditional use permit, and so.
So we can't use the 2,000 foot thing and everything else, but by limiting or putting the zoning in a more, whatever our most restrictive zoning is, would that do the same thing, or is that with the state? I'm not even sure what I'm asking, because I don't know all the zoning.
What are the ways
designations.
to restrict how many of them we have? Is that kind of what you're getting at, or like where they're allowed? I mean, where would be your?
Well, I guess doing it would be where it's allowed, but in that would kind of restrict the numbers also.
Well, what Jacob.
This is what I'm trying to think.
Yeah, so for example, if you only wanted them in the general commercial zone, we have limited general commercial zoning, that would be one way you could limit how many of them occur. Like if you don't want one to open in the riverfront district, for example, downtown, you could say, well, no, don't. You could have a special use for psilocybin service center and it's not listed in the riverfront district, that would be one way. Or like Jacob said, you could make it a conditional use, which would require a public hearing before the planning commission anytime one wanted to open up. And they can look at it location specific and apply conditions on their approval.
One of your tourism facilities sounds like.
I mean, I thought that was really interesting, honestly, that it was like what to do during your stay, and they have all sorts of site for it.
Spirit of Halloween Town Service Center.
Discover Columbia County.
So I have a question, and it's this, is what restrictions does Portland, Albany banned, if any, do they have?
None,
Ashland?
no, so if you go back to that slide,
So there's only been 11 statewide. We're a year into this, right? Is that correct?
so they started accepting applications in January, I believe. If we go back to my very first slide, it says the timeline. Sorry, Lisa.
Yeah.
Making you work.
But I just don't think there's a huge influx.
So January 2023, they accepted licenses and then the first one opened in summer 2023.
And I haven't heard either way, and we all would, of why we have a moratorium on psilocybins, people wanting to set up shop here or wanting to use the mushrooms either, so
Has anybody inquired about it?
I have had none.
I haven't heard a single thing about it.
Yeah, so I don't, I mean, I just thinking outside the box, I don't see it being a huge issue. Portland. You'd think there'd be a lot more in Portland. Weird.
I agree with you. Those prices and I mean, maybe it'll happen.
At this point.
Yeah.
Could the conditional use regulate like whether it looks like a disco or a medical office?
I did see the disco looking one, I was like, oh.
Architectural standard.
Well, a government body of a city or county may adopt ordinance that impose reasonable regulations on the operation of businesses located at premises for which a license has been issued, blah, 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 blah. City or county may not adopt ordinance that prohibits premises for which a license has been issued, the service center from being located within a distance 100 feet from another such premises. So it's just kind of a general statement. And that classic issue of what's reasonable, which attorneys just love.
Well, our conditional use permit criteria, it allows the commission to put restrictions on it, and through that process, you can, you know, incorporate screening of the facility, you can require landscape, you know, certain landscaping, you can require buffering between facilities.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to create new rules specific to it. As Jenny's mentioning, we can just use our plain Jane conditional use permit criteria, which kind of gives a case by case basis based on the circumstances of the site.
That way, if you have one that's adjacent to a use that's sensitive, that maybe the OHA is not covering, you know, OHA covered schools, but maybe there's another use that you're worried about it being located by, or.
Or to buy an apartment complex and you think they should have 8-foot screening.
Right.
For whatever reason or something like that.
Or landscaping, yeah.
Yeah, and I would imagine that you could connect that sort of conditional permit around sort of appearance issues to the reasonability of fitting the purpose of these facilities, which is to provide medical treatment. So I'd like to think there are ways we could avoid the disco scenario. And my apologies, everyone, for joining late. I was having internet difficulties while out here at my in-laws.
It's okay.
Anybody watching that was David Rosengard, planning commissioner.
Yeah, I was like, who?
He's also an attorney.
Hearing voices, are we in a position?
Right, maybe you're at a facility right now.
Then in the Riverfront District, I don't think you can tell them how to paint their building or how to decorate their building. That's freedom of, they can do whatever they want. You know, you can't prevent a business from, I know that we went through this with the cannabis, with trying to prohibit their signs and screen this and screen that, and we had a slew of lawyers in here telling us what we could and what we could not do. Because you can't, it's a judgment call, what is professional and what's not, and what's freedom of speech and what's not. So I just think that's a slippery slope that just invites people to try to litigate things. Because if the Oregon law hasn't touched it, and I mean, we had so much pushback with the cannabis, with signage and stuff. We wanted them
Yeah.
gone. And it's just
Yeah.
like slippery slope, because my art is not somebody else's art.
But we can do that in the Riverfront District.
I would think that in a historic district, there's other rules.
Right, your historic district design
There's other
rules.
rules that apply to everything.
and
You're not
control.
psilocybin, you're telling everybody to play by the same rules.
Right, exactly. I think you can't say we're going to apply a certain speech standard to one business and no one else. But I think for screening, again, if it's not about speech, you'd probably be all right.
Yeah,
Your point about signs is really well taken. I don't think there's anything you can do about signs, or that kind of communicative stuff. But if you want to, I don't know, foliage screen between the side of the building and something else, you can probably do that.
somewhere between a dentist's office and a bar.
Yeah, that's right.
Spectrum.
Yeah, I mean,
that's big.
it is medical, but it is.
Yeah, I will say, you know, when marijuana was just in its medical phase, we have a little bit of action here, but not much. And the little bit of action we did, the guy was did because he was more than he had. But it was the retail when things just, that's when the green wave came. And so it's very possible that us continuing to not receive inquiries will continue, you know, for a bit. And so we don't necessarily have to adopt something before the moratorium ends. It could be later as things evolve.
But a conditional use permit is a quick. It doesn't involve you rewriting a whole bunch of code.
Yeah, if we just made it a conditional use permit and did not add any special standards specific to that, it wouldn't be too painful, just a little bit of typing.
We'd have to create a new definition for psilocybin service center. So we'd have to define it as OHA licenses them, and then we would have to pick which zones we want that to be listed as a conditional use.
Yeah, but it's not a prohibition, it's more of a speed bump.
Yeah, but we would, as part of the notice, need to send what's called a Measure 56 notice saying Cause we're creating a new regulation, a new burdensome regulation, and so it's a rule that says we have to notice property owners. You know, this amendment may affect the value of your property, et cetera, so on and so forth. We did that when we adopted the duplex rules and sent it to a whole lot of people and got very little comments on that. So I imagine we wouldn't get any comments, but we would have to, you know, a little bit of extra burden, not that big of a deal, but just something to keep in mind.
No, there's no restrictions in those other cities, and it's not like it's a huge influx. And I haven't heard no stories about anybody tripping out,
The pilot.
except for the pilot. Good point.
And I recall when there was a place in Portland that opened up illegally and there were lines around the block. For it. I like the idea of the conditional use.
Just one layer of safety, if you're concerned.
I like that idea too.
Does anybody object to that?
Is
Lisa-
that a motion you made?
Could you go to the slide where I talk
We're just
about?
giving direction, we're just giving direction.
Yeah, if you recall, we're not supposed to make decisions, but this
Yeah.
helps us understand which way the wind's blowing.
And then the other question that's roped in there is Lisa's scrolling, so the uses. If our commercial zones are highway commercial, general commercial, and then our two mixed use zones, Riverfront District and Holden Business District. So does it make sense to allow them conditionally in all of those zones?
You pull up the zone map, I guess.
So because it's legislation, there would be some preliminary discussions with the planning commission. I think where we start digging deeper, and then for any legislative act, we're supposed to get a green light to proceed for the concept from the council. So there would be additional discussion, but I think today, if we understand the wind's blowing a certain way, then you would understand we need to prioritize that and go through that normal process.
Sounds like, even though we don't see this pounding on our door to open these, that we should have something ahead of time in place.
We would be prepared. In the so the risk is the unlikely event, one gets here, it goes nuclear, pisses everybody off. Why didn't you do anything, council? They come here, throw eggs at you, and it's really fun.
Show up anytime.
The state mandate, right?
Yes, yes.
Is it a federal mandate?
Not that I know.
It's just strictly states.
Nothing federal.
So
Matter, cause.
Well, the flood issue had issues with that, you know, they're still dealing with that, so I just wondered if it was a statewide, just a state, if we wanna be first.
I think that we should minimize it down to zoning. Because I don't feel comfortable leaving it completely open to just like,
All commercial.
yeah.
We'll point those out.
So the most
Pink, red, and the two shades of green.
well, and the purple,
Oh yeah, the purple, it has a little bit of purple too.
that. So the pink is highway commercial. General commercial, it's the apartment complex. This is the mixed use zone. Okay, and then the Riverfront District, and it would just be, it wouldn't be the Marina sub-district, which is north of the courthouse, it would be. Everything south of the courthouse there.
The blue.
No, blue is public lands. This color, oh, you're colorblind.
Yeah, I'm
aren't you?
colorblind.
This is not how.
Russ?
Good to me.
There's no idea.
I was wondering why you painted those buildings pink.
Oh, and the green, I didn't mention that.
Well, remind me, does the manufacturing have to be within the service center or the grow, whatever the processing?
So, to reduce our existing zoning, it would be, light industrial and heavy industrial zoning, so the light gray and the dark.
So I could see where you might want the manufacturing in the industrial zone, but the service center, I think, needs to be,
Yeah, they're separate use categories.
okay.
Couldn't they have one person have all of them though?
The state law allows them to be joint.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
all of the types of manufacturing.
Yeah, all three. I thought you said that one person owns a business, they could have all three.
So it's
It could all be in one building.
Processing, so like extraction, and then the edible one, so where you're producing products with it.
It's not a service center. and a
Not service
manufacturer.
center is a separate category altogether.
Okay.
The service center is where it's delivered, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it can, and
that's where it's obtained and consumed.
right, so the law allows them to get product from somewhere else, right? So if there was they don't have to grow it themselves, right?
That's right.
Extract it, so.
Separate, so the wholesale provider can provide them to a
Right.
service center outside the community.
But the state does allow the service center to also be the place of manufacturer. And so if we did adopt something, we probably want to define psilocybin manufacturer so it's clear about those separations.
Okay, so you said that the state allows them to be the facilitator, have the facilitator and manufacturing. Within place.
The state does, yeah.
The state does, but our code would want them separate, because they're different use categories.
That's all by zoning.
Yes.
You want them separate, or they would have to be separate, or
Well,
say one of
we
them.
can adopt rules for however, but it makes sense to keep them separate, because.
We have to still adopt them to keep them separate, is what you're saying, or they're not already.
What Jacob's saying is, if we define psilocybin service center
Mhm.
as a conditional use, we would probably also want to define the production.
Yeah, because the state allows them together, it's gonna be easier for us to have clear standards rather than, oh, good, it's not in the code, I don't know.
Manufacturer too, so we better figure out what we're doing, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to see them stay out of the river district.
The only reason why I thought that might be good is because being able to will kind of control the looks of the building and the cosmetics, you know?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with waterfront that we
Keep it out.
need to down here.
What about medical offices out? Oh.
It would seem,
That is true.
it seemed to me that if you're,
Right, so you wouldn't even be able to tell.
Yeah, so that's a good point that Commissioner Curry has brought up, but it's a considered a medical office. We already have one down here, physical therapy.
But if we define it separately, it's a different use and.
Good.
Which we don't have to do, but we certainly can.
But we're not deciding anything today.
No, but it gives us to understand where to put our sails in the wind.
They start the process.
Yeah.
All of the nitty gritty would be worked out during a public hearing. Properly notified, but
We'll probably discuss more refined, preliminary ordinance with the planning commission, get a blessing from the council, and then have the hearing processes.
sounds like we're okay with most commercial zones, except maybe the riverfront district is a little more sensitive.
Mhm.
Okay, so highway commercial, general commercial, Bolton, and mixed use, all kind of, at least for discussion purposes, okay.
Standard opportunity for you.
Yeah.
Business license could be 10% of gross. For some money, there you go.
Do you think? Right now, we're hearing just under the general conditional use process. There shouldn't be any separation requirement, but we want to maximize the 1,000-foot allowed. 500 feet, just not worry about it. Separation from schools is automatic within the state. And it's something, you can think about, we don't need an answer today.
You're kind of halving it again, is what you're saying, because in the manufacturing facility would have to be 1,000 feet from any other service center manufacturing facility.
Is that what you're doing? Well, it would be. The prohibition on separations for service centers.
It's Lincoln.
But if manufacturing was separate. And allowed in industrial zones, I don't see why we would want to separate those.
Some distance. They're already different zones.
not hearing much on that, so.
So if somebody wanted to open up a mellow mushroom pizza joint, they could open up their psilocybin thing right next to it. They have combined mushrooms going back and forth.
Theoretically.
There's a little different meaning if you want mushrooms on it.
That's right.
I am curious what other communities are doing. They're probably all having conversations with their electeds now too, because the 2-year moratorium was adopted by a lot of cities, so I'd be curious. Probably gonna be some rules starting to get adopted as we move into the new year.
And would this require a special use permit? Like annually or like from the city? Is there something we can do like that?
So once conditional use permits are granted, that's it, you know, as long as they vest it, in building permits and establish the use, it runs with the land, as long as they're in operation, they have that use open.
What's the control in this? Like, if somebody, like, I get where they're coming from, right? But where's the oversight on whether or not, like, somebody is just going in there and
That's a good question.
That's why I was asking if
doing a
they
bunch of,
any inspections beyond.
right, to me, that seems a little bit
Like
lax.
over administering it and not.
Yeah, like it's a, Party Central, right? Go down there.
That's what I was talking about, a business license, and you can have a fund that someone goes around and inspects these on an annual basis.
Yeah, I would imagine it, I mean, like the public health authority issues health licenses for restaurants, right? And there's just random inspections to make sure everyone's operating. I don't know if that's how it is, but it seems like that would be a good way to enforce it.
So in 2 years from now, if you get a pizza in St. Helens, the mushrooms taste a little funny. You know, just be wary.
Start melting.
Well, it's gotta be whoever's doing the license, OHA is doing the license, they're gonna have to be the ones that monitor it.
Yeah, it's not on the city, it's the license isn't for the city.
From what I got from you is they're gonna do a one-time inspection and then it's free, it's a free-for-all.
We can, I mean, before our next conversation, we can look into it and talk to OHA about it.
But it's complaint driven, just like anything, any other violation of.
But I'm not hearing really anything about them following up on it.
Well, SEC has anything.
Oh, they're not.
Well, I imagine that there's gonna be some oversight. I can't imagine they're gonna not. Regulate this in some form or fashion, right? I mean, that's only a certain dose amount. You know what I mean, like you can't overdose somebody. But, who knows? Cause it seems like right now they don't have a really good idea of what they're even proposing. Yeah, you just open it up and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, I mean, they could probably revoke people's licenses too, if there's like malpractice or it's like any other license they can revoke.
I mean, it happened with pot shops with people with, getting busted for marijuana stuff. People came to try to get pot shops and they got their license pulled.
There is a state tax.
Shocking.
I think I read somewhere that the licenses for service centers cost $10,000 or some, it's pretty high cost, and that's probably why they're recovering their costs from clients. And that's in addition to all the individual facilitator licenses, they have to take the exam, there's probably fees for that. So all the fees OHA requires really bring the cost of services up.
Well, and if it's anything like marijuana industry, unless you own the building, the landlords are gonna get premium dollar.
Well, for a conditional use permit, it's gonna go to the planning commission, so it's gonna be bill vetted.
Yep.
We'll see this. I don't see it being a big issue, but this.
Conditional use go to the user or to the property. Well, they leave, it goes up. Does that extinguish, the conditional use extinguish on that property?
Well,
Is it linked to their license or linked to the location?
How long does the use lapse?
normally it's to the property, but you could potentially put something in there that says, in addition to running with the land, it also runs with the specific provider. Is that, I'm assuming you could.
So if they just sold it to another provider, that conditional use would go away. You have to get another one.
Potentially, depending on how you define
That's what I'm
provider.
saying, have it go away.
I would think that could
start the process for anybody else.
It's already established that kind of facility, just manager who owns it maybe.
I mean, I don't know what other conditions you could apply if it's already. Like, if the site's built out, what more conditions can you apply to a condition? I mean, we've seen that down here when a church wanted a conditional use permit and it's like. Site's built out all the way to the property line, what else can you require?
Shall be within 500 feet of a pizza parlor. Sarcasm.
Yeah.
Wonder if it is like marijuana, to get under it.
You know, the article we were talking about, like, building some of them with places where the people could sleep and like stay the night and like, because there's a demand for that. Apparently.
Where's Tina?
And what's the outdoor space for?
Yeah, that's
Another
It could just be an
area,
outdoor space, doesn't necessarily mean a treatment center.
McDonald's houses.
I think getting more information from them on that part would be good. For us just to understand it. Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns?
Well, we kind of know where to put our sails in the wind now, so.
Okay, we'll go on to the next item, which is discussion of vacant storefronts.
So I'll just prime this briefly. This is something that the planning commission brought up. And they were talking about their proactive items and getting word from citizens and kind of want them to think about this. And I know Commissioner Shoemaker wanted to speak on this. So I just wanted to prime it to help with your discussion.
Yeah, I think the conversation started really, for me, when we talked about proactive items. It seemed like we were picking items that might be on our personal agendas and not something that community wanted. There's certain themes that I hear from the community all the time, and one of the biggest ones is vacancies, long-term vacancies downtown. So should we be taking on proactive items really that for the citizens, it makes sense to me. So that's kind of where it started. I did some research as to why filling vacancies matter. And so as part of the city's redevelopment, we should prioritize revitalization of all the business districts in town, especially the River District. We certainly don't want to create a wrong side of the track scenario. According to Indiana Main Street, vacant properties can undermine the physical health of area properties through unsanitary conditions and potential for injury. Blighted and abandoned properties decrease surrounding property values, harm the health of local housing markets, and reduce local tax revenue. Successful initiatives to address these issues can spur profound growth and improve a sense of place in our community, which I think we need desperately. The municipal code in a city in California, they recognize that abandoned and vacant buildings contribute to blight in the city, discourage economic development, and diminish appreciation of property values, endanger public health and safety, attract criminal activity, create fire hazards. It is the responsibility of the property owners to prevent buildings from becoming a burden to the neighborhood and the community and the threat to public health, safety, and welfare. This city council found that vacant buildings result in increased expenditures for police, fire, and code enforcement inspections and calls. Maintenance of public health, safety, and welfare thus requires the city to maintain an accurate registration of all vacant property buildings and to impose each of the requirements, procedures, and penalties set forth. A couple examples that I found that I thought were interesting and something we might consider is a vacant building registry with a monitoring fee. Examples seem to be if the building is going to be vacant between 30 and 90 days. Code enforcement could be the one to monitor the properties. There could be a registration fee or an annual fee that accelerates over time that it's vacant. Also, they need to have adequate proof of property insurance. I don't know if we do this now, but it seems like it should be part of the registry. And if you could imagine a vacant building burning down and the property owner had insurance that's lapsed. And now, not unlike an uninsured motorist, you have issues on the adjacent property owner, so I think that's really important. There could be an exception, if the building has a valid building permit or proof the property is offered for sale or lease at a fair market value. So you wouldn't want somebody to get around the vacant property by putting a $300,000 building at $1 million, hoping that it never sells just to get around the regulations. Other examples have shown could be a punitive vacancy tax. The other thing that's worth noting is in historic preservation, there's a term known as demolition by neglect. An example is Gracie's Annex building. In my opinion, the property owner is getting exactly what they hoped for. They let the building get into such disrepair that it's considered light and should be torn down. I think we need to protect against that. In conclusion, as commercial property starts to change hands down here, we need to ensure that we don't allow storefronts to be vacant for years or to be used in a manner that does not encourage business that bring people back to Main Street. We need to show the citizens and the stakeholders we are paying attention and are implementing a solution. In my office down here, it's most often a ghost town down here, and does everything that we hope to do if we require these buildings to be open instead of a private storage facility or whatever. If we have storefronts, let's bring people back down here. We have storefronts that are only open during special events. I don't think that's a benefit to the city. I think we need to, I mean, gosh, think of small businesses that could come down here and fill these storefronts. So
The one that always bothers me the most is that the Fat Boys.
that's it, yeah.
I mean, that to me.
That 5 storefronts, I think.
Yeah.
5 storefronts.
And I don't even know, somebody living there?
Private.
I
storage.
believe someone is living there, is my impression.
That, okay, I mean, it's.
Dealership.
I've been in there and I
I'd love to go in
I
there.
don't believe that.
All right. Well, I mean,
anybody's-
either way, it's not being used as a storefront.
It's
And I think
not.
it is a really good example of this. And I would echo everything you said. I think that there's a solid body of evidence from cities all around the country that trying to fill and activate vacant storefronts has a positive impact on the community, on a sense of identity, on the tax base. And I don't claim to have the exact answers at this point, but I think ideally, if we can come up with some sort of carrot and stick approach that both penalizes letting places sit vacant and incentivizes, the kind of uses that we'd love to see, I think that could be really, really beneficial for us.
Using Fat Boys as an example, and I just never paid attention, are those buildings connected?
Mhm.
So if something's going wrong in that building and nobody knows about it, it affects the other buildings on either side of it. But the other,
It would be incredible to be storefronts in the front. It has this beautiful, big, huge section in the back that would be an amazing venue of some kind. It just has so much possibility and
Yeah, I've seen pictures when there was a car dealership in there.
It was a dance hall, right? Counselor Sundin, in your
Yeah,
presentation?
that was-
Oh, okay.
It's what growth.
Dealership.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of cars inside.
Oh, that was
It's Gilby Motors.
I've seen pictures and my ex has been in the building.
How would you get businesses to go? You can't build a new building, you gotta take one of these vacant places and build. How would you fill them otherwise?
But it seems like the problem's not that, it's the problem's the owners of the buildings.
I think you're overlooking one thing, it's all great, you should tell the building owner to fix these up and do that. Enter the building department, it's not Mike, it's the whole building codes. And so you've got a building, you say, well, fix this up and put it out for rent. Well, before you can do that, bring it up to code, so fire suppression, if they have one, it has to be redone, it's too old. Firewalls don't meet code. None of this meets code, so at probably $250 a square foot, you can go ahead and do this. So now here's the guy who owns the property. And a lot of these property owners are old, they're just hanging on to it. You don't wanna go into that kind of commitment. You gotta hawk the building and the property for all the money and put a ton of money in themselves. And so, there's one of the big issues, if they probably would like to see it active or something, but financially, it's this day and age of costs prohibitive.
It would be nice if the
Equalize.
building was of a certain age maybe or something, that if there was some kind of leeway with that, if it was just health and
Well,
safety or.
Yeah, no, live fire and safety on that, on buildings. There's no backing down from any of that. If you got a certain occupancy, you have to meet that level of occupancy, and that's very expensive. Molly Market, she just went through that and just said, screw it, they're the perfect example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She
true.
didn't need a lot.
Was there a way to
I wonder whether there's any utility in looking at, yeah, I'm just thinking of places in Oregon, since we're dealing with, that eliminates as few different factors as possible, but looking at somewhere like Astoria or other cities that have, older buildings that have in the past sat vacant, I'm curious what sort of measures they took to try to address that, or did they just get lucky and eventually the worm turned?
Yeah, I mean, is there restoration grants that would help people?
Or can you offset it somehow, something we do have control over? You can't control that situation, can you control
Well, I mean,
control taxation or something that incentivizes them to?
I see the press releases of lots of businesses getting grants, 100,000 here, 100,000 there. It's like, has anybody ever approached one of these vacant building owners to see if they, if there's something that can be done? Because I know that Running Dog, isn't that what they're still called? No, there's something else. Crooked Creek.
The record store now.
No, the Crooked Place.
Yeah.
Oh, Crooked Creek,
At
sure,
Dockside.
Crooked Creek.
It was
Yeah,
Dockside,
It used to be Dockside, they got money.
Klondike,
Klondike got money.
several,
You
we got
got
some.
money, so it's like, and I know that other communities have done under Main Street grants, have gotten, the theater got money.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's money to be had if people approached it with the right team.
The money we got was 5% of the total project cost. That didn't tip me one way or the other of what I was gonna do.
Right, but if
It
somebody
sure
could
was
get
nice.
somebody, you could offset somebody, get somebody closer to, at least a work plan.
No,
Yeah,
with the Klondike, he's all gung ho and wants to go ahead, and he's come ahead of the planning commission a lot, to get things done. He got another grant to put an elevator in.
Yeah.
He needs to go 5 floors, basement on up, 5 floors. Anyway, he needs to put a regular elevator in, and he got a grant for 17,000 or something, I'm not sure what it is. But I know to go on one floor is $50,000.
I do know that properties are changing hands, and it seems like when investors are coming in, they're buying more than one. They get excited about it, like Ollie's brother. They not only buy one building, but then they invest in other buildings, and I know of a few others that are going to be coming on. Right now, the bank's for sale.
I just
Land
think,
current's changing use, and so it is unfortunate that there's an affordability issue, but we don't do something about it, then.
well, because a while ago predates this group, but we had people sleeping in storefronts. Because the housing issue was so, and it's like, how do you tell one person, property owner, you can't have people sleeping in there? And you can't use it for residential use, but then somebody else is able to use it for a storage facility. So it's like, there kind of has to be one set of rules for everybody on the block.
And that was kind of leads to my question, which is, how do we enforce this? Like, who enforces it? Who says, that this building is not operating the way that it's supposed to?
So in these examples, if there's a registry that if, let's say your building is going to be vacant.
Yeah.
More than 30 or 90 days, under those conditions that it's not for sale, and there's a fee involved, and then the code enforcement does the rounds. And it's an annual fee. The longer, in some instances, the longer the building stays vacant, either the property taxes or the fee accelerates. So that it's a penalty basically for allowing it to stay vacant.
Really like the idea of a vacant building registry. I think that's a good start,
Mhm.
so we can see what,
Yeah.
you know, what's really going on in St. Helens.
I think the outcome would be on that.
Well, if we start a registry, I'm not saying we do, you know, everything that Jennifer is suggesting, but I'm thinking. Starting a registry to get it started so that we have an idea of, exact documentation of what's going on in St. Helens as far as vacant buildings. Who owns them and what they're being used for.
Some of the registries require that the name of the property owner and the phone number is posted on the building, so if there was a problem with the vacant building, you're not running through trying to look through public records to see who the owner is. You can take care of the problem before it spreads to other.
Anybody talk to Main Street about this?
So Main Street's some of the ones that brought up the issue that we need to start addressing it.
Yeah.
A lot of people from there, because
They're starting
they'd
to,
like to get involved.
they did some walk around going on and things, so I think that's still in the works, but. That would be a good thing.
They'd have a good idea of,
Planning commission, give you results of what they found out.
Main Street has access to other Main Street communities. When I was supervising the Main Street coordinator, I heard this all the time. So there's a lot of communities out there, Sherry Stewart. I think they could be a conduit, they're a prime conduit of information and research to help, this body have ideas to help shape things. I think the registry is a good example though.
And in my first instance, it was from Main Street, Indiana.
Lisa, so Lisa's pointing out, we do have a vacant property registration for chapter 8 in our municipal code already. I don't think, she was saying there's no fees and it's purely reporting. Probably not accurate. Well, yeah, and there's no one enforcement.
Yeah, no one's probably doing it.
No,
Yeah.
for even a list.
Yeah,
A list.
I have an Excel spreadsheet that I send on a weekly basis when I get new properties in that goes to code enforcement and a building official.
Can you share screen so that?
Well, what does code enforcement do about that list
It's
currently?
abandoned.
Well, I think that part of the responsibility of the property owners is to keep the building in good repair, so if code enforcement goes around and moldings and things are falling off the properties. and
Trash out front and
been
things
broken
like that.
into, or it's,
I've reported broken windows on things that are supposed to be boarded up. Because it's a place for squatters, it's a place for lots of unpleasantness.
but it seems to be also needed for underutilized buildings, like if you'll be motored,
Excuse me.
that boy, whatever you wanna call it. Not a abandoned building, it's being used, it's just
Right.
not the right use.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
there Be some of that. also.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two separate but related problems. There's the entirely unused vacant problem, which connects to an extreme end, the demolition by neglect scenarios that we've got, for example, with Grace's Antique. And then there's this other problem of whether you want to call it subused or unactivated or just not the use that we'd prefer. And I think the issue there is trying to get a handle on respecting the property rights of people to do what they want with their properties and apply that equally. Are there ways to proactively encourage uses that more enrich the community? I know this is on Main Street's radar. I do really like the idea of trying to use them to do some research on this, because I'd imagine they could turn to their counterparts elsewhere and ask what's worked in other places. And that might give us a good starting point.
That's the question I had, I guess, is what's the difference between vacant and underutilized? Because we're talking vacant. I'm sure if we talk to that property owner, he's gonna say it's not vacant. I go there, I use it, so.
So
I'm
that's
just thinking of the,
that, but what if we use that to, if it's licensed for whatever it was licensed for. The last active license, and now it's just storage. Can't we use that to leverage them to do something with it?
Non-
That is,
Non-conforming use, because there are no storage units on Main Street.
The storage unit, it's personal property.
Yeah.
He's probably not gonna call it a storage unit, if you ask him.
It's not open.
Not making money with renting
Bringing
out
people
storage.
downtown.
Well, maybe.
We don't know. Yeah. Say that.
It's not a garage. Any way you look at it, it's,
okay, as a garage, really.
We might argue.
that's not a Main Street activity.
I'm just thinking the The bank is a great example of an underutilized building, been a union hall for years. They handful of guys go there once a month and have their meeting and close it up
Yeah.
and just beautiful building, so much potential, and it just
Like an awesome coffee house or something.
sits empty.
Yeah.
Again,
One thing to keep in mind is I'm presenting these and I'm not just a planning commissioner, I'm a stakeholder. So I could be implementing policies that I'm not gonna be over there forever, 50 Plaza. So I'm gonna have to abide by these rules and it's just. Probably won't be happy about it when it didn't lease or whatever, I mean, just.
But I think of also the buildings that are open and available for lease, that have been open and available for lease for going on 2 or 3 years. It's like, what's wrong with that building? What, are they letting it just degrade? Because there's,
That's why it has to be at fair market value.
yeah, because there's buildings that have water leaks and stuff that have been allowed to just sit there. Who knows how much mold's growing in that building? And are they allowed to just do that and just sit there derelict forever?
you need to address all of Columbia
Yeah.
Boulevard down here.
Yeah, I mean,
Same thing.
it's all Main Street. 'cause,
You also need,
Town.
yeah, you need, there's the carrot and the stick, nobody. Taxpayer especially that has a building doesn't want a stick coming at him and say, well, I'm gonna charge you more just because. There's a carrot out there, go, well, I didn't think of that, maybe I could do something, so I would refer this over to Main Street, and see if you could get together and. They're out there beating the streets and stuff, and a lot of the members there are storefront owners. So, you can get some good feedback there, but.
How does this tie into the new commercial inventory that we're gonna do? Do you see any tie to?
The new commercial inventory?
Economic opportunities analysis.
Hmm,
Is it good timing that it's like together something?
This is more of like an implementation strategy, like this is more specific for how do you meet your goals? The EOA is more like, what do you have? What do you need for your population into the future as far as zoning? That's my understanding. This is a very targeted Main Street implementation goal.
That makes sense.
I've only been through one AOA, so I can't really have experience with a bunch to.
What are our current rules for the historical district's aesthetic looks?
Meet the standards of the Secretary of Interior,
Show you the guidelines, wanna look at them online?
Yeah, we basically have two sets. If it's a historic landmark, which means an official designated historic structure. Then it goes to our historic preservation chapter, which is basically maintaining the historic integrity. And then if it's not a historic structure, then it's our architectural guidelines, this document here.
And it has sections on signage, it has sections on doors, entries, windows, colors for siding. It kind of covers the whole quantity of building elements.
That's a very limited.
It's a really useful guide, having gone through that myself. It's a useful guide.
But it means you're doing something. It doesn't apply to a building just sitting there and collecting moss.
Right, so this applies when you apply for something to a building addition or put new windows in or put a door.
Not current buildings.
No, it does. If there's any exterior alteration proposed to an existing building, it has to go through this process.
But there's not like current rules for just, buildings that are just down here sitting.
Yeah, there is.
To do something.
only
So
with-
is there any kind of applicable rule for historic districts or particular historic buildings that addresses the historic features being damaged by inattention or neglect?
I mean, we do have a demolition by neglect, which is something that is a no-no in our code. But I think it's something that would be challenging to enforce. It could be kind of a dance. But we have that, but that only applies to those official historic resources, not all buildings citywide or within even the riverfront district.
Right, but it would apply to both primary and secondary supporting buildings in the district. So if we've got, to use the water leak example, if we've got a building where a water leak is just slowly destroying one of those historically designated buildings, conceivably that's something that we'd have tools for.
It would not apply to the secondary and primary in the National
Okay.
Historic District. It would apply to the locally designated
Gotcha.
properties. And we have a good map that kind of shows that.
I think it's in here. Have you ever referred to it in here?
It's in the Planning Commission resources.
Oh,
in the
okay.
historic section. That shows,
And there's very few city
here.
designated landmarks.
In here?
I was gonna say, probably none are storefront,
the historic
light and
preservation.
are happening.
Yeah, I think it's
This was on my list. I wanted to, one of these things, I will talk to you about this, Jacob, because I was curious how this register came about, because in my opinion, there's lots of buildings around town that should be on the register that are not.
the third one, downtown historic district.
We've only added one since the 1984.
But it has the boundary and the properties identified with the star.
Only in the district, not citywide, but we can pull it up.
Yeah, most of them are there though.
There's missing
But
one.
because the question was the primary and secondary ones within the district. So this is the historic district boundary. Anything that's gray is outside of the National Historic District. And then the designated landmarks, the ones locally identified, have the little building emblem. And it was an effort from the early 1980s. I'm not sure, do you remember reading what initiated that, other than just people were interested in it?
No, I went through a box of when our district was established and I don't remember anything specific. I know that they had a larger list and they narrowed it down to the ones that are designated landmarks.
I think that's an education piece for the public because people wanted, in the Historic Society, we found an article regarding what that process was and people bailed like crazy because they were worried it would restrict what they could do with their own property, and that's an education piece because it does not.
Yeah, so there's 23 designated landmarks, and some of them are outside the historic district. So
Sure.
Well, I feel like a lot of them are houses.
some churches, interestingly, there's the stone wall, so not all of them are buildings, some of them are just.
Yeah, the plaza is one of them.
I just think, looking at this list before, there's so many things that should be on this list that are not. I don't think the Columbia Theater is on this list. There's. Like I say, this was made a long time ago, so.
Jacob and I had the talk about all the things that probably should be on there. Because the criteria is 50 years and that really where.
That's one of the criteria.
Right, but that means there's a lot of things that could go away. That people would be like, how did we let that happen?
Yeah.
And then, so then how do you convince people to get on there? We do have one incentive down here where in the riverfront district, at least the plaza sub-district, residential on the ground floor is not allowed and single family dwellings aren't allowed, except when it is a designated landmark and the old Rock Pizzo house, whatever it's formally called. He was the
Millionate Cottage, yeah, was the
Twilight.
bookstore and.
It's the Twilight Bookstore.
So that's a good example of where our incentive worked. Someone purchased it. We told them, hey, here's the situation here. If you want to retain the ability to use this as a single family dwelling, you know, we recommend that you become an historic landmark for that incentive. And they did. And so we actually were able to add to the list. So we have something added that wasn't from the 1980s.
The exception to that, though, is if they're currently. There's no lapse in residential use on the main floor, they can continue to use the main floor.
Sure, yeah, so an existing conforming use, but I don't think of any example of that. That's a
William
legit,
Scott's house, the Jennifer Grant's home would be one.
but it's an historic landmark. So it fits within that
Okay.
same exception.
Is that something that the Historic Society would like to tackle this a little bit, and look at,
Well,
kind of make I mean, that's kind of off our agenda is what I'm asking. Of our agenda item, but I think it's great discussion.
I think it's outreach to property owners who may be willing to voluntarily nominate themselves.
So there's an organization called Restore Oregon. And they already have curriculum in place on how to educate your community on what it means to be part of that list.
Okay.
So I think that might need to happen. I like to see the entire district encompassed in the review of the Historical Landmarks Commission.
So
Just-
that's something we could do together as a commission. Joint planning and city council to educate. Our citizens. For future agenda stuff.
So we make a video. Making videos.
Brandon's a great presenter.
Actually is.
Main Street thing where they did a lot of historic classes and brought people in and taught people how to fix their homes and all that kind of stuff. As a way to get people to realize the benefits of, and they did it through Main Street. As, you know, because it was, they have the bandwidth, the volunteers and the focus on one street and focus on a big area.
But just so you understand all the historic landmarks within the city, we created this map. So you can visually see those. Actually, you get on the other side of US 30. With the White Way House right by Walnut Tree Park.
Yeah, this one surprises me down here too.
That's one of the stone building.
Yeah.
Stone
And
constructed
that-
houses.
That stone building and whole.
Who would be, but. I'm just gonna say, because we're not even on this item, we're supposed to, but who would be the person who came in and said? Well, this has no foundation underneath of it. It's been here forever. It's completely dry rot. It's got bugs all over the wall. The windows need to be all redone. You need to be to that historical standard. Almost be $3-4 million into a house if you, I mean, you did a beautiful job on those windows. I know you spent a ton of money on those windows. Who's the decider of, well, it's not cost effective? There's gotta be some way of saying that, unless it's neglect, but once on the registry. It almost needs somebody to go through and do an inspection of these houses as they go on the registry.
There is already research that's been done on at least the houses that are part of the 1984 historic district application. And they talk about conforming and non-conforming. So if there have been changes to a house, like for instance, was one up on Nob Hill that I had to deal with, and it said, if you remove the aluminum windows and reopen the porch, you could return it to conforming. So there is some of that research that's been done.
Sure.
And it's not as specific as saying you have to model the windows and things exactly as they were. It's saying don't take out wood windows and put in vinyl, replace with wood windows. Doesn't have to be.
Would that be the carrot on the stick if you offered that to homeowners? That recommendations and, I don't know.
So you really do need a carrot though, because I feel like we're asking,
Another-
hey, join our registry and let us inspect your property.
David would be a really good example because the way I understand, when he bought his house because it was in this historic home within the district. Specifically wanted it because of that, so there is a movement in the country that. This goes all the way down to trades, people that specialize in historic trades, they make more money than. Other tradespeople, that they're more specialized.
Well, I see that movement for houses, but I don't see it for storefronts or businesses. And that's the problem that, full circle, right back to our problem is that. Nobody really wants to buy an old business, pay to restore it, and then, it's just a lot.
I'm assuming there's no inspections like in some of these vacant buildings, right? If they're sitting there, they're paid for or whatever, they pay their property taxes. Nobody's going in to make sure that everything's working.
No requirement of insurance.
Right, I mean, is that true?
I'm not aware of anything.
Well, I know a lot of us are familiar with Main Street. I generally do attend the meetings once a month. But I know a lot of you are familiar, but maybe we need to lean on Main Street for discussion of vacant storefronts a little bit and get some feedback from them.
Good place to start.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I think they'd be very willing and want it.
Figure out what tools you have and then figure out what tools we want to put in the St. Helens toolbox.
I just think it's time to move it to the forefront because like I said, buildings are changing hands now.
And ultimately, it's not about any particular persons, it's just about, how Main Streets work, and they'll be able to explain that better than we can. You know what I mean?
Well, I think they
So-
also have a really good pulse on the businesses down here. Which is important.
Vacant properties, like,
Cities too, so it's like,
yeah. Vacant properties affect the value of other.
one of the cities around Oregon. So it's like they know they're,
Yeah, they've gone and visited a lot of them
they
and
see it all.
taken notes.
It's just another city for them and they know what to do.
Does Main Street, do they work with businesses that are looking for specific properties that like we might have and try to negotiate that? You know what I'm saying, like bringing just McMinimans, like they will put one in anywhere, right? They attract things like that and say, hey, look, we've got this building here that you might be able to get into.
Not as much.
Okay.
Commercial thing.
They support businesses, and try to, promote, support, and, there's actually four criteria that they do. That's their mission. I apologize to them because I forgot those. I know we hammered it about 6 months ago. Pretty hard. But that would be again part of their education piece on what their mission is, and that's why they can explain this a lot better than.
Sure.
any of us sitting here.
We don't have a Paul Vogel. Going out there and recruiting business.
Like to a lot of money people as fixing up an old building or building a new one.
Yeah.
I think people there with it. Okay.
They've got access.
Part of this lively.
Well, they've got access and they know who's active out there and one of the grant money and. But, they're part of it, but they're dealing with Grow Oregon now, so they've got that money to deal with, so they've got a lot of incentives that can be brought to the property owners. Make them feel a lot better than I'm telling them they gotta fix up their building.
So we don't wanna wait nearly as long as we did this break between this and this, so we're scheduled for, we usually do quarterly.
Yeah, they're scheduled quarterly. Sometimes the meetings on the calendar and we're like, wow, this doesn't work at all. But yeah, we missed a couple.
We had some speed bumps.
Yeah, we did, yes.
Good mark.
Before we adjourn though, can I,
Yeah.
just one more?
Uh-huh. Absolutely.
So last night at our planning commission meeting, it was brought up to us about our stipends and with the state of the finances within the city and the cutbacks, and we were asked if we would be open to pausing our stipend. We were pretty positive, actually, most of the group. Our feeling was Jenny had a great point that, because it was first saying, well, your $30 stipend, what if it went down to 10? And doing that, you're forgetting all the administrative costs of issuing a check for $10 instead of for $30.
I would rather see it pause.
I'd rather see
It
it
just
pause.
takes, that's that many less checks she's gotta worry about, that many less stamps, that's all just. Pause the whole thing. When I first got elected, the first time the paper council was at one rate, by the time I took my position, council had implemented and it went clear to $500. And it was council made the decision for budget that we're gonna tighten the belt and everybody's gonna feel the pinch. And so based on that, cause I was like, oh, in the spirit of teamwork. And so in the spirit of teamwork, it's paying the butt to go to the bank for a $90 check. It's not gonna be more fun for a $30 check.
And
So.
I mean, I personally would like to see it. I assume that other commissions and things have stipends too, maybe they don't, but. We certainly don't want to be the only one that's doing it, but if it prevented the staff from having to furlough or anybody to be layoffs, if it's our small part to contribute to them, I'd rather.
That's awesome.
See them get the money than us.
That's awesome. So, and not to get into any I think it's great that you're offering that. I think the budget committee that has not even been formed yet, really, we need to look at that. And see exactly where we're at. I mean, we know kind of in general that we had some ARPA money that basically, I'm gonna not get too much in ex parte contact because we've had so many public records requested of us. Also about House Bill 3115. And there was a lot of chatter on 3115 from both commissions. Okay. So I don't want to go too far into that, but we appreciate the offer right now. For now, we're gonna keep the budget as is, okay?
Showing good teamwork.
Oh, yeah, I'm just.
Also got a paycheck. Paycheck.
So we'll wait for the budget.
Yeah, we're gonna
See
see
how
how the
they.
budget committee, yes, I don't even want, yeah.
Suffice it to say, none of us got on the commission for the stipend.
No, you guys have either.
We didn't know we had one. Oh, it must be like, well,
No, that, I mean, that's what our community is about, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you guys for all you do.
That's the purpose of this meeting is to come together for the wellness of our community. And so that was the purpose of the conversation is to say, we're all in this for the long haul, for the big picture.
Yeah, yes, exactly, and that's why I just, again, thank you guys for all you do for our community, it does not go unnoticed.
I'm willing to sacrifice my entire paycheck. And you're a giver.
Public servant.
When they start doing group mushroom sessions, we can all go together. I love
Last year.
That was too much.
So we'll shoot for a date, you know, in about 3 or 4 months, and I'll reach out to Main Street. I think we have a great MOU with them, so I'm sure they're more, and they're probably something they would want to tackle, and maybe we can have them join us on that meeting as well, or a couple of people from Main Street to present.
I know they'd be up for
And
that.
that way they're not alone too, because they're gonna shoot out how it works, and they're gonna ask us to help direct that too. Yeah.
It's definitely gonna take a team for we're headed into, we need to all be on the same page.
Definitely we and not me. Yeah. So,
It sounds like we have at least one agenda item for the next one then.
yep. All right, anything else that anybody may think could be an agenda item for next? And if you do, reach out to Jacob.
excuse me.
I just wanna say how productive this meeting was. I felt like I heard a lot of voices and ideas and just dedication to St. Helens. So I appreciate all of you guys.
Good seeing that.
Really good meeting.
Really.
I think it took a couple years.
Yeah.
Having been on the planning commission and then moving to council, I think there's time that I'm gonna see where I want to ask the planning commission before we make decisions and use you guys more rather than just making your decisions and coming to us and
Wants to know what he's doing at the planning commission, so.
yeah,
The
I know.
planning commission and the council should help him be that liaison that.
So I was
helpful for.
I was actually gonna bring that up, and I was gonna ask the league, just because we are getting so many public records requests, that I don't feel that Gunderson, it actually qualifies as ex parte contact for him to sit in on the planning commission, because some of your stuff comes to us. So, I was gonna bring that up at actually my council meeting, but while we're all together, I want to bring that up, that, it does actually qualify as ex parte contact, in my opinion. I'm reaching out to legal, but it's very borderline issue with all the public records requests we've been getting lately. I feel, and I'm gonna bring up the council meeting, that we need to tighten up our ship and also educate all our boards and commissions on ex parte contact too. So that'll be something I'll be bringing up, and I'm asking to be put on our next agenda, so. I just wanna make it clear right here when we're together, that it's nothing other than that, and we'll have legal advice and our legal team, the council meeting.
We don't need anybody to visit the ethics commission.
No, I mean, it's just, you know, we're just trying to accomplish all the same goal, we really are, so. there's no
If
everybody.
everybody with the spirit of teamwork, it's a lot easier. You don't fear this meeting. Cause I got to the point on council where I actually feared these meetings and I stayed away from the building because it was so upsetting to me. And it's like, that's not that doesn't invite people to serve.
Mhm.
And so just to be on the same team, I know Rick has got his heart in the right place and everybody on the planning commission is in the right place, so
Well, we have 2 vacancies to fill, so.
we gotta find good ones.
Yes.
They're coming back, right?
And you too, yeah, I need another, yeah, I don't have enough hours here. Stay right there.
You got a promotion,
Stipend, you know.
you went from stipend to salary.
You can get a cardboard cutout for now and just say your tone of the voice this month.
The incentive is no stipend.
Yeah, I could zoom in.
You want the carrot approach, no stipend.
Yeah. I don't know worry about that.
All right, well, we'll rely on Jacob and Jenny, like we always do. All of us appreciate you two. Phil, by the way, Lisa, Christina, and we'll rely on them to get us a date that works for everybody.
Happy Christmas.
Yeah. Okay, with that, you're adjourned.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.
I know.